Alrighty, we are good to go. Quick little tier list video. This is mostly land battle. Tier list stuff. I don't know too much about domination, honestly, so you don't really want my opinion on what's strong in domination. Yeah, if you disagree with any of my placements of the factions, please actually listen to my section about that. I do absolutely hate when someone's like, how can high elves be in S tier? Like, they're Lothern Seaguard got 50 gold cost decrease, and it's like I spend the whole time talking about how strong Imric and healing and stuff are, and it's like, okay, well, whatever. All right, let's get on with it. No particular order, just whatever order they're in this folder. Beastmen. I actually have been seeing a lot of Beastmen recently, and they're still doing pretty good, especially with the Minotaur changes. They got a couple patches ago. People are really coming to their own, liking the Beastmen a lot. I'm going to put them in A tier. They're solid. They have good mobility control with their Centaurs and stuff. Minotaur is currently performing quite well. Their Lord options are nice, and Traderkin has been very, very useful. So Beastmen are A. They are solid. Cathay. Grand Cathay. Some people would say they're probably S tier. I'd vote between S and A. I am going to put them in... Oh, boy. This is tough. I'll put them in A tier for now, because at high levels of play, Cathay can be manageable. I don't know. That does sound kind of S, though, doesn't it? It's great. I'll put them in S, but it's at the very, very top levels of play. Cathay is more of an A or a B. But I guess if we're considering all skill ranks, then Cathay is extremely, extremely strong versus people that, like, I don't know, of more average or lower than average playtime, I guess I would say. But if you're at the top of the top, Cathay's not that bad. So, yeah, they're up there. Just their front line's insane. All their cannons are insane. Healing's still really strong. Miao Yin got buffs. So, yeah, Cathay's really, really strong. Chaos Dwarves. At the start of the patch, I was thinking they were B tier. And then I was thinking A. Now I am going to put Chaos Dwarves in S tier, and it is because their roster overall isn't that strong. Like, it's just, it's pretty fine. The problem is Astrogoth is mega broken. Bull Centaurs are pretty broken, especially against ranged attacks and stuff. And Magma Cannons are super strong. And people have just been spamming those three really broken things. So the rest of their roster is balanced, but with those three things just being spammed a bunch, Chaos Dwarves do end up in S tier. Bretonnia. The Grail Guardian buffs helped out a lot. I'm going to put them in A. The meta is mostly healing right now, healing and mobility advantage. And Bretonnia has both those things in spades. Their Lord options still aren't the best. Even the Fey Enchantress isn't performing super great right now. But Grail Guardian's carrying super hard. The rest of cavalry is doing all right. And the Battle Pilgrim buffs really give them infantry that can stand and hold. So, yeah, Bretonnia's feeling quite solid. Dark Elves. I am going to put Dark Elves in S tier. Now, while Cathay is an S tier at lower skill ranks, and that brought them up here, and Chaos Dwarves rely heavily on a few broken units, Dark Elves just didn't get nerfed from the last patch, and they got left alone, and that brought them up to S tier from A. Soul Stealer's still really strong. The Supreme Sorceress of Dark actually got a buff, so she's way cheaper than Malekith now for doing a lot of the same things. Malekith is still really, really strong, even with, I think he got a slight cost increase. He is also very strong. Malice was untouched. Their Lord options are all supreme. Death Magic is very strong, so if they go Malice, they can have a Death Caster, making their Lord and Hero combo super potent. Scourge Runners did get nerfed, which was quite nice, but Dark Elves overall are still performing insanely well across the board, so they are still in S tier. Dwarves I'm going to put in A. We have been seeing a lot more Dwarves, even at high competitive play. I think Caradoc and Calharman both took them, so yeah, the Dwarven boxes can be very annoying to deal with. Gotrek, Felix, and Thoric combos can also be quite tough, but just spamming miners with blasting charges and as many Dwarves as you can muster with Thoric Ironbrow giving them buffs makes them rather strong, and Chariots still aren't working, which is their main counter, so Dwarves are currently sitting at A tier. Empire. I'll put Empire at B. They're B or A. I'm going to go with B just because the factions in A I think are better than Empire right now. But Empire is fine. I actually have very, very little complaints about how they're performing right now. I like them a lot. I wish cannons would get a buff so they'd hit more things more often. But they have decent artillery in the Sunmaker, one of the only artillery in the game that's performing well. Their cavalry options are pretty good. Demigryph Knights have been feeling nice. Healing on the roster is good, but they have other Lords of Magic as well. The only thing holding the Empire back is their Lord slot. their Lord slot right now is not ideal. I frequently just go with Gelt because he's super cheap, but Boris and Franz can be useful. They're just very expensive for what they do compared to more updated Lords. So Empire could maybe use some buffs in the Lord category, but overall they're performing very, very well right now and don't need a buff or a nerf as far as the roster goes. Greenskins. B or C? B or C? I'll put them in B. The Ragnarok Spider buffs felt pretty good. I haven't got to use them a ton, but when I have gotten a matchup where I know a big single entity is coming, the Ragnarok Spider buffs were good. Nor nice. Azhag's performing okay. I still think Wurzag is the best Lord just statistically. Some of the Savage blank buffs, like every Savage unit got a buff of some kind. I mean, it was fine. You still don't see a ton of them, but it was okay. Greenskins are fine. I think they probably need a couple more buffs despite sitting in B, but I don't think they were low enough to put in C. But they could use still a little bit more love. Lizardmen. Oh, this is going to be tough. Do I put them in A or S? A or S? I'll leave them in A for now, but it was a tough call. Lizardmen have access to insane healing, which I did mention. The meta is all about healing. Their infantry isn't doing so good these days, but they have plenty of skirmish elements that they use effectively. Their monstrous infantry and croc scores are feeling really good. Their cav options are still kind of meh, but their single entities are strong. Their winds of magic are very, very good, and Ripperdactyls have been performing quite nicely. So A tier for the Lizards. I debated putting them in S just due to the sheer amount of healing we've seen out of them, even bringing in some Shredder of Lustria builds, but I'll leave them in A for now. That seems a little more appropriate. Tomb Kings. This might be controversial. I think Tomb Kings are in need of buffs. I think Tomb Kings are in C tier. They're still a very popular faction, but I very rarely see them win. Or if they do, it's just off the back of Ark and the Black's death magic carrying the whole roster. Tomb Kings just need some love. For a while, they've been the Ushabti Great Bow faction, but that gets more and more apparent each day. Their Lord options outside of Arkan are very weak. Their hero options are very weak. A lot of their monsters aren't very good. The chariots suck. Their cab sucks. So it's down to just infantry, which their infantry isn't that great, and Ushabti. The melee Ushabti are making a comeback, and that's nice, but it's not enough to hang your whole hat on. The roster has been struggling. Khorne. Khorne. B or C? B or C? B or C? I'll go with C. The Mino Bus Rush is probably still the only real way to play them with a bunch of Fleshhounds for support. Their Lords are just too expensive without enough sustain. The Herald of Khorne has been making a bit of a come up, but he does need a cost decrease for God's sakes. He's like 2,000 gold on his motorcycle mount, and he's really weak. His buffs are nice, but still, he is overcosted. Without that, the rest of the roster just needs a bit of love. Their infantry could use some better stats, some cost reductions on some of their cav or monsters or something like that. Yeah. Khorne's just a little too spendy. Kislev. I did mention this on a previous stream. I hadn't recorded this video yet, but I did know it was coming. Kislev's a D tier. I think they're in contention for the worst roster in the game right now. They're not unusable, and that is a high point of the meta right now, in my opinion, is that, even D tier factions can be usable and S tier factions can be beaten. It's not as bad as it was pre-patch 3.0. In patch 2.4, I think like the S tier factions were much further away from A tier than this. But yeah, anyway, Kislev's just fallen behind. Their roster's too small, and their bear chariots suck. Their cavalry kind of sucks, so it leaves you with two things your opponent has to worry about. Infantry spam and bear cavalry heal blobs. So if a roster brings something to punish a blob, the rest of the army can just go towards killing infantry, and you'll be fine versus Kislev, and that's a big problem. Their roster's just too small. They need a DLC, and they need chariot fixes. High Elves. I'll put High Elves in A. It's between A and B. I'll put them in A. Healing is still extremely strong, and they have relied on that for quite a while to buff up Imric, who can try to solo carry games if you get him enough healing. Foot characters are still busted, so if you put your Mage of Life on foot, she's almost impossible to kill for most rosters, making it pretty guaranteed that you'll get stuff for regrowths for Imric, and she doesn't cost a lot of money. Other than that, Love and Seaguard buffs did hit them. They definitely feel less powerful than they did last patch for sure. Dragon Princes do okay in Cav versus Cav fights with some heal support, but I don't know. Cavalry charges aren't working the best right now. I think High Elves will get a buff if Chariots and Cavalry are fixed overall, so they might need nerfs if that happens. But for now, they're an A. And technically, by my criteria, if you're an A, you could technically use nerfs, but I wouldn't. I'm not calling for High Elf nerfs. I do think they're strong, but it's fine. If healing gets nerfed, they're going to get kicked in the dick, though. Skaven. This is going to be controversial. Because I am a Skaven main, a lot of people are thinking, a lot of mains like to whine about their factions. I try to be really fair about Skaven. I thought coming to this patch they were going to be like S tier, because a lot of their counters got nerfed. But I'm going to put them in C tier, and here's my reasoning. You can disagree, that's fine. But my reasoning is, Poison Globes did get nerfed. They're still actually pretty strong, but they did get nerfed. And the biggest problem for Skaven isn't what happened to them, it's what happened around them. Everybody started realizing how strong Death Magic is, so Fate of Buna just eliminates any expensive weapons teams you have, and the fear is gone. Like, people were so scared to take big single entities into Skaven because they were usually so good at killing it, but with Fate of Buna, you can just delete Jezzail teams or Rattling Guns or something. And also, people realize Warp Lightning Cannons and Warp Block Jezzails coming into Game 3 don't do what they did in Game 2, so they're no threat. Literally, only threat to a big thing is Rattling Guns. Hell Pit Abominations are terrible at dueling all of a sudden. Rat Ogres can't hold anything back that's, like, way larger than them. And Skaven Infantry can just be ignored. Plus how powerful healing is, you can usually just walk like Cal Harmon took a Dread Saurian build and just is Ruffle Stomped Skaven like twice on stream. Realizing that, it's been so hard to play Skaven right now. Like, anybody who can bring Death Magic and anybody who can bring Giant Monsters has just been kicking their shit in all day. So I think the meta around the Skaven changed, and that dropped them down. The roster itself feels fine. It's just people are playing super differently, and it's really bad for Skaven, in my opinion. But I could just be a shitty main. Norsca. Norsca's been feeling good. I'm gonna put him at A. It'd be between A and B, but Norscan Ice Wolves, Famir, Skin Wolves, and Death Magic are just having their day right now, and Norsca has access to all those things, so they're doing quite good. Also, their foot range units, the Marauder Hunters, are doing very nicely. Skirmish Cav, for them, has been struggling a little bit, but they don't seem to need it. They're just strong elsewhere. They could, as usual, need better Lord options, but Throg and Wolfric are holding it down for now. Norsca, no real complaints. Good for you. Nurgle. Nurgle got some buffs. I'm still going to put them in C tier because, kind of factoring in all levels of play, I've only seen Nurgle really do that well under, like, Cool Umbrella or Cal Harmon running them, like people like that. But in general, if I face a Nurgle player as almost any faction, I'm feeling pretty comfortable. Their toolkit is still really small. They rely heavily on hero hammer blobs trying to heal up, and I don't know, it just doesn't feel that impactful. The Toad changes were nice for sure, but the game plan's still the same. Just have ranged units and a stalwart frontline or a strong mobile game, and you'll be fine versus Nurgle. Ogre Kingdoms. S tier or A tier? S tier or A tier? I'm going to put them in A, but it's between those two. I'm going to put them in A just because, again, it's comparing them to their neighbors. I would say Ogres are more similar to these guys than they are to those three at the top there. But Ogres do have their place. The same shit I've been talking about all thing. The healing meta is here, and it's really strong. Ogres have some of the most healing in the game. They also have a lot of giant monsters and monstrous cav, which are performing nicely. The only problem their roster can face is if you go with the wrong build, you can kind of get shit on. There's not a lot. There's like one or two ogre builds that can do well versus multiple factions, but most of the time it's like, if you go Crusher spam and your opponent's ready to punish a blob, you just get murdered. If you try to kite and your opponent rushes you, you just get murdered. Like, there can be some serious build problems with ogres, and then you just lose the game on the load screen. But that's just my take on it. Slaanesh, D tier. D tier. Slaanesh versus an even matchup feels really bad right now. The only time Slaanesh feels good is when they counter their opponent, and that's like Skaven, maybe Beastmen, maybe Greenskins. Definitely Skaven. I don't know. The rest just feels so bad for Slaanesh, man. It feels terrible. Hellstriders are dog shit now. Their Marauders are okay. Their single entities still suck. Yeah. Slaanesh just took too many nerfs in one patch. I think they feel really bad. No, Nameless Order did beat me on my Skaven with it. So, like, a good player can still win, right? When I'm talking about Kislev and I'm talking about Slaanesh, it's like, I think if an AI played an AI of equal skill, the C tiers would beat the D tiers, right? But it's not like, you can't win on Slaanesh. But I do think they were over-nerfed for land battles. I think they need some love. The Vampire Coast. Maybe a spicy take, but I think they're B tier. I think they're popular at high levels of play, but I really haven't noticed them being too oppressively strong. They have some bad matchups now, like Chaos Dwarfs that got introduced to the game are pretty strong into them. They took some healing nerfs like the other vampires. Their pistols got nerfed a little bit. Nerfs just kind of across the board, catching up with them, and people shifted their playstyle, like I said, to healing and cavalry and SEMs, which is a little harder for the coast to deal with than when people used to be spamming infantry and they could bomb or sweep the front line and do well. But that being said, they're in B tier. I don't really think they need buffs or nerfs right now. I think they're chilling. Decidedly middle of the pack. Tzeentch. At the highest tiers of play, Tzeentch is extremely annoying, but I am going to put them in B tier. Now, most things I've put in B tier, I said don't need buffs or nerfs. Tzeentch, in my opinion, could just be salty. Tzeentch needs a real hard look at by whoever designed it, because right now, a lot of the games I see is a Soul Grinder and Kairos trying to solo carry the game by spamming Blue Fire, Regrowth, and Cycle Charging, and the rest of the roster gets dumpstered on without paying for itself at all. So Tzeentch games are just not very interactive right now, win or lose. If they lose, it's like, well, my roster just sucks. And if they win, it's like, that was really fun to watch you cycle charge for 20 minutes. I don't know. Tzeentch needs a serious looking at. Because, like, if you nerf Kairos and Soul Grinders, great, but this faction is going to go straight to, like, F tier without them. The rest of their roster needs some significant buffs. Flamers still shoot above the heads of their opponents and just don't deal any damage. Blue and pink horrors, neither of them have armor piercing, so maybe exalted pinks should get armor piercing or something, but a horror game style of play only works versus light armor, low leadership factions, and that's like half your roster. I don't know. I think Tzeentch needs some buffs in some areas, but then please God, nerf Kairos and Soul Grinder. Daemons of Chaos is going to be our perennial D tier. Their faction design just has problems. Demonic units are weaker in land battles than undead or mortal units, because in domination mode it's advantageous for once your unit gets so weak it disintegrates away and you can resummon it, but in land battles that's just terrible for you. So your roster is really squishy, expensive, and dies quickly. It's just not good. Again, you can win games on them, but you're putting yourself up for a challenge. Also, the Be'lakor nerfs hit really hard. He's too expensive now. Vampire counts. Oh, I kind of want to put them between A and B tier. Because when you're thinking about vampire counts, you're probably thinking about the best player you know that plays vampire counts. But generically fighting vampire counts, I actually haven't had that much issues. I'm going to put them in B. Yeah, I'm going to put them in B. They got several nerfs, all in the same patch, right in a row. So, like, their healing is down on several of its sources. They got Winds of Magic increases on their cheap spells that they like to spam. I don't remember if Cryptoras got specifically nerfed. I don't remember. They feel a little less impactful. Anyway, Graveguard and Black Knights also got nerfs, so it's just a lot of nerfs in a row for vampire counts, taking them down, I think, to B tier. They have just, like, one playstyle, pretty much. So if they counter you, it can still feel good. If you counter them, it can still feel really bad. They kind of end up in the middle, B tier. I think they could use some buffs to certain areas to diversify their playstyle. Because right now they still rely very heavily on the Blood Dragon Lord. Warriors of Chaos, C or D? C or D? I might have to put them in D tier. Hellstriders, honestly, I think put them closer to A tier last patch because Be'lakor and Hellstriders were viable. But now Be'lakor is so expensive and Hellstriders just aren't worth your marks of chaos. They might be in D tier. Archaon is solo carrying this faction, and Archaon is insanely good. The rest of the roster is really letting him down, I think. Could be just my take. You do sometimes see Archaon at higher levels of play, but again, it is just Archaon, like, literally solo carrying the Warriors of Chaos. So I'm going to put them in D tier overall. One good lord does not a faction make. Wood Elves. D or C? D or C? D or C? I'm going to put them in C, D. Oh, this is tough. God, I think they're still closer to a D tier than a C tier, though. Like, my heart wants to say C, but comparing them, it's like, well, Nurgle's better than Wood Elves. Skaven's better than Wood Elves right now. Khorne's better off than Wood Elves. Tooney's better off than Wood Elves. Okay, yeah, then I guess we're down here. Yeah. I think Wood Elves is still D tier. I don't think it's, like, super far away from C, though. I don't think they're doomed. I think they are actually better than these 4 factions. So you could maybe put them in either one. But Wood Elves are still struggling with the same problems they have in Game 3. Their range units, while still strong, aren't ridiculously carrying games like they were in Game 2. So you now have good range instead of overpowered range. Your mobility game is still weak for some reason. Like, a lot of your cav just isn't performing that well. Your infantry still suck. Your monsters still suck. You have access to healing, but that's really all you have going for you. So Wood Elves, down in D tier, they can win some matchups, but overall it is feeling like a hard time for them. And that is it. That is the tier list. We tried to keep it short, tried to keep things moving along. If you disagree with anything in here, that's fine. I gave my reasonings for putting them there, but a lot of what's interesting about this is the conversation. You know, so if you're like, oh, my Elves is A tier, I think they're B for this and this reason, that's fine. Just keep it respectful, you know, don't be like, well, you're a fucking idiot, bro. It's like, okay, I base these opinions off of watching hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of replays and tournaments and all my streams and stuff, so I have a reason for putting them there, but it doesn't mean it's correct. Just respect the time I put in, I guess. Okay, goodbye. Roar. Subscribe, yes, yes.